Alright, Agincourt, this is, I was pretty excited to get this for a reasonable price. It never sells for too much. There's probably a reason for that. It's not much in the way of a game. It really isn't. Maybe some of the other scenarios have a little bit more in the sense of real competition feel to them. Now, the historical scenario is really not meant to be one, and that's what I played, so I guess I got what I deserved there. The problem that I have with it is the mechanical complexity of all those fugitives running across the board. The rules also seem a little funky in the sense that they don't really specify that the fugitives should only move one hex. In fact, maybe one hex every other turn, just because of the hills, etc. And that's slower than any other unit. There I kind of feel like, well, they're only supposed to move in the fugitive phase, though, and they're supposed to use the movement rates of other units. That could just be an omission. It works okay either way in terms of delivering an absolute route. I'm keeping my pipe lit always when I'm speaking. You can hear why. As far as components, it's actually, this is one of the earliest really pretty full color kind of SPI maps that I think I've seen. Otherwise, I have no idea what kind of die came with it. It was probably pretty crappy. I remember SPI put out some pretty lousy 20-sided dice in their games. Not really lousy quality, but I don't know. You know, the modern dice are so much nicer. Is I guess what it comes to. Where back in '78, I was using pretty crappy dice myself, so I shouldn't feel too badly about it. But worse indeed than what I got from any SPI games. Many charts, most of which flow okay. The only really tricky thing that I had, other than not noticing, geez, I got a different table for firing at cav and archers and such. Not, you know, how can I not notice all those tables? I don't know. But the only other real thing that I have an issue with, the melee adjustment is not on the same side as the melee chart. I don't know how they, you know, could have handled that. It's possible that they could have put the melee chart on this same page here and put the title back here instead of the melee chart. Would there have been room for the terrain effects chart then? No. It would be tight. So I gotta trust that Simonson did his best layout to get that together correctly. I found the idea of tracking strength points on every single unit on an off-board chart somewhat tedious. You could, of course, use paper and pencil for that. That would probably be easier. My eyes are getting worse, and it's getting difficult to discern, to read the designation, which was absolutely necessary in this case, and then to read it on the map across the board from you. So with counters that were far away, it was kind of tough to see that. Another issue is that there's no real distinguishing between the French and English troops. So unless and until you set it up or look at the chart here, you don't really know whose is which. That could get kind of disturbing at times where you're looking on the board. It would have been nice to have maybe a border around one or both of them. There's also not quite enough of these fugitive markers. We saw that pretty quickly. But mainly, it's just, I don't find the game really worth playing. I was getting some enjoyment out of it. I think think I get some enjoyment out of just about anything. It's just, oh no, oh yeah, Simonson designed it. Worden did the development for it. I guess the pity for me is I really wanted some of those old quad games. A friend of mine had a couple of them. I played them or read them. They looked really cool. And they were at a more simplistic level. Now with things like Men of Iron and Infidel and I don't know if I have others. I mean, I do, but I think they're all, I can't think of it. Oh, I have the Guelphs and Ghibellines, which I want to try. And the Great Battles of History stuff too, which, you know, has some similarities. Those have less appeal, the Quadra game ones. But this is a significantly different design. And if you want to really look at route, a massive route in progress, and at least one kind of modeling of that route, this is actually a pretty neat system to do that with. That's where I got my kick, was seeing the route happening and wondering if there were any lessons from this system that could go into creating a more detailed yet still playable means of handling route in something like Great Battles of History. The thing you don't want to do, though, is this is an unstoppable route. And you don't want to make every possible failure. I mean, basically the Army routes, without the Army failure table, the Army routes just by all those fugitives running through it. They strip the Army down. They take away most of its strength. That's what we were seeing. And then if you start moving through that at the same time, you're guaranteeing that your Army is going to disintegrate. Now, the historical scenario ensures that. So the real question is, can you take anything from this and maybe use lessons from this game in another design? Now, given that I don't design games and don't even bother trying anymore, it doesn't really serve too much of a purpose there for me. I still have some interest in it, otherwise I wouldn't have picked up Pendragon, the role-playing game that I mentioned earlier, or keep an eye out for Popes and Princes. I mean, something in me still wants to play around with ideas. Pendragon, to me, is not quite ready for prime time, but it's close. The first edition, yeah, I think it's first edition. I was told it was actually second edition what I have, back when I used to play it, that the first edition had dwarves in it, but I can find no mention of that anywhere on Roleplay Geek or anything like that. Anyway, going off on a random tangent again. Yeah, there's aspects of the view here that I get to see into that route that I'm kind of glad I have it for that, but I don't think I'm going to pull this out and play it very often. More, it's just the memory now is lodged in my head. But it's always nice to have a reasonable size box, or even the soap boxes. But I like this size, actually. The soap boxes are very compelling, but I prefer this size to anything else that SPI put out, I guess, maybe. Just because it's closer to everything else and it all sort of fits together that way. Well, these don't pop open the way the little flat ones did. I didn't like them. Anyway, not a lot to say here. There's not much game that I see. Not to say you can't play a competitive game of it. When we calculated out the victory points a few turns before I bailed, making a habit of that, it seems, what we saw were really not as overwhelming as it looked. And I think if the French can try, maybe not in the historical scenario, but in the other scenarios, well, the multipliers aren't so good there. I think it's going to be a tough job for the French to win this under anything except maybe the King Harold's folly, or King Harry's folly. I'm not sure. Well, if you fight it on the plains, that's just asking for it. But I don't think that's even a realistic scenario. I think the French would be mounted in that case. All right. Let's send it up.